Nice and tight, nice and tight. Good, set yourself. Easy walk now, easy walk. You're breathing, you're breathing. Fight this, Nick, fight it, fight it. Tight. Control, control, control. There you go, fight it, fight it. Finish, finish, finish. Ah!
What is going on, guys? It is Uncle Nick here, and as you saw in the opening segment there, that is a clip of me doing my qualifying submission for the official Strongman Games. So I figured, why not do a tips and tricks video on the farmers, the little things I do to make my farmers go smoother and faster and just be better all the way around. I'm gonna give you guys some of the cheats, if you will, on the farmers handles and what I do to get a little bit more out of the farmers carry. Let's get into it, guys. All right, so first things first, one thing I do when I get up heavy in farmers, I stick to just my compression shorts. Why do I do that? I do that because when you're walking in shorts and it's heavy and your hands are brushing up against your sides, one, what happens is my thumbs will actually drive up and drag up the side of my shorts that I'm wearing and kind of get caught underneath the shorts and kind of restrict my leg movement. And also, it could come up on your fingertips and actually pull your fingers out from underneath the farmer's handles. You do not want that to happen when you're doing a max effort farmers or in a competition. So if I'm going just compression shorts, I know I will not catch on anything on the way up. There's nothing in my way. My legs are free to move. I'm free to shuffle and move as fast as I can without any impingement from my clothing. It's little things like that that make all the difference when it comes to high pressure situations. One of those things is the clothing I wear, which I did find out the hard way because I picked up a farmer's. My fingers got caught underneath my shorts and I dropped them about 3 feet later. Not a very heavy weight either. So I couldn't even use it as heavy as an excuse. Like Andy. Hey, neighbor. How you doing, neighbor? One of the other things I do is not only do I chalk up my hands, but I go over and I walk up to the farmers and I actually get a bunch of excess powdery chalk on there and try and get it down to the metal as much as I can so I don't have a lot of slippery powder all over. And then I take chalk and put it on my hands. I don't do a bunch, but I take that powder and I actually rub it into the handle. Yeah, that might look bad, but we're adults here, ladies and gentlemen. No, we're not. Too much chalk is actually an issue. You get too much powder in between your hand and the implement you're trying to hold, and it will create slippage. So there's a happy medium between too much chalk and not enough. So then I go and I chalk my hands. Now what I do, I chalk the load-bearing zone of my hand. So I get it all nice and thick there, where it's gonna cradle in my palm in the meat of my hand. Then I actually go on the ridge of my thumb, because how I'm gonna hold this farmer's handle is I'm gonna go in here, just like this. It's gonna be kind of in the crutch of my hand. So I want chalk on my hand where it's gonna contact. Now you can kind of see through the chalk where it rubs off, all through here. I'm gonna go and chalk each finger the same way. Then what I'm gonna do is, just like on the bar, I'm gonna take my hands and I'm gonna get that excess powder off there. So you can see the chalk actually kind of rubs into my hands. So from there, the next thing I'm gonna show you is, we call it cranking in your grip. What happens is when most people do is they go straight down to the bar. They grab it and they pick straight up from there. You're losing pounds doing that, people. I'm sorry to tell you, but you are. What you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna go down to the bar just like that, crank in my grip, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a speed bump. It balls up a lot of the skin in my hand, pinches it between the bar as I crank in my grip. So what that does is it creates like a speed bump. As you can see, I'm pushing it up with my thumb. That's the same thing the bar's gonna do in your hand. It's gonna create that speed bump right there where all your calluses are. So I'm gonna crank in my grip. Now if you go too far, it will actually get momentum and roll out of your hands as you go to pick. So you do not want to crank in too far and give that bar momentum, because no one in the history of ever is carrying a farmer's like this. Ever. It's something you gotta practice and get used to. It's fine-tuning stuff. This isn't basic general how-to farmers. This is some of the tips and little things that you kind of get to implement after you've learned how to do farmer. I've now cranked in my grip. I'm gonna stand up with it. So what I'm gonna do then is I'm not gonna take a big giant step. It's not gonna be a big giant step. I'm going to essentially float like Casper the Ghost with these in my hand. It's going to be short, choppy steps, but if you notice, I'm not getting a lot of this wobble because I want to glide. The more wobble you have, the more instability you have, and the more taxing it is on your grip. If you get a lot of this side-to-side movement, just like with a yoke, it is going to cause that instability, and it is going to cause you to drop the yoke or drop the farmers. In this case, obviously, you're going to drop the farmers because it's a farmers video. We're not talking yokes, people. A big mistake people make is they try to stride out. Now, your stride is going to be proportionate to the individual that is carrying the farmers. You have longer legs. Obviously, a small stride for you is going to be a long stride for me. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to kind of shuffle. And some people, you notice, they get a little more hip shuffle, which is okay. But what you do not want that to translate to is that wobble. When I say I'm going to glide, fast feet, floating upper body. If you're not familiar with Looney Tunes, there's a cartoon character called the Roadrunner. Now, he was chased by Wile E. Coyote all the time, but he was really fast. And what he did was, his feet were a blur, but his upper body kind of floated. That's what we're going for. So you don't want to be taking big giant steps and bouncing, kind of being all over the place. You want those feet to stay underneath of you and moving fast. Think like gears. Smaller gears create more torque than bigger gears. So you're taking those short steps. A, you can accelerate faster, and B, you're going to be smoother because of it, because you get more contact with the ground. So what you're going to do to practice that is start light, work your way up just like anything else, and ingrain that speed. Now gradually over time, that speed will come. As you get heavier, you'll get used to moving faster with more weight. You'll be able to accelerate faster. It'll all fall into place. But it's one of those things that you have to practice. These aren't things you just walk up and do, because it's, like I said, fine tuning. You've got to work the kinks out and find out exactly what pace is going to work for you, because it's going to be different for each individual. Now taller people are going to look like they're walking slow, but that will be faster for them because they have longer legs, like Andy. Another little trick that I like to do, it's not really a trick, it's more of a personal preference, but I actually wear my belt a little bit higher on the farmers, and I do the same thing on the yoke, but I actually wear it highest on the yoke because you tend to break in the upper back before you break anywhere else with that implement. I do notice that some powerlifters do it for their deadlift, but I like to do it for my farmers. I actually wear it about mid-rib cage, whereas I normally wear it lower back, right around the belly button, because that's where it works for me. That's where I get the brace, where I get my best brace when it comes to deadlifting and squatting and overhead and other things like that. But on the farmers, I bring it up about an inch or two towards the middle of my torso, because with the farmers, you want to keep that proud chest once you're bearing weight. As soon as you start to fold over, your upper body kind of collapses in on itself. So to kind of prevent that and hold my brace, I bring it up a little bit higher, so if I do start to collapse, I run into that wall where I'm bracing against to kind of prevent any further breakdown as much as I possibly can. Especially with that 50-foot farmers, you have to breathe. You're not holding your breath carrying 300 pounds in each hand that entire time. So what I do is I actually breathe in a cadence with each step. Now it's hard to see, it's hard to hear, but it's to the point where it's an unconscious effort. My body knows to do it now because I practiced it. I'm still bracing, but I'm not completely exhaling. Because when you completely exhale, what does your chest do? Everything sinks in the front. While you're bearing weight, you're not getting that real estate back. I don't care what implement you're using, you let that brace go, under load, not coming back, at least not coming back to what it was. So what I do is, it's kind of like swimming. I gradually exhale as I go to a certain degree, and then I take a short inhale in so I can continue squeezing. Because if I take big breaths, I'm not bracing. I'm focused on breathing versus those short choppy breaths. You can continue to push out against this belt the entire time you're breathing because you're not completely exhaling, but you're also not completely inhaling. You're giving your body just enough to breathe and function while maintaining a brace, and it is uncomfortable, but it works, and it is something you have to learn to do. It's going against your body's natural instinct to take a big inhale and a big exhale. Like when you're running, you slow down your breathing, you take big deep breaths. It's the opposite here. It's almost like hyperventilating. But if you find the rhythm with your footstep, which is what I do, it takes a lot of the thinking out of it. So in between your steps, you're actually inhaling, and then when your foot's landing, you're exhaling. If that makes sense. So I'm going to slow it down for you. I look like a complete idiot that is actually what's going on in a slowed down motion and an exaggerated environment. So basically the goal here is to get your breathing in a rhythm with your footsteps. It'll make learning how to breathe and brace that way a lot easier to understand if you can associate it to a certain cadence. At least that's how it worked for me, because in the military everything is under cadence, so that's how the light bulb went off in my head, and that's how it clicked for me. So I'm bringing in the big guns, the the grip extraordinaire, Dirty Andy.
So 2 things that I do when I'm doing farmers to make sure, on top of what Nick already talked about, to make sure I'm dialed in and nothing happens that I didn't plan for. So Nick talked about chalking his hands, which is great. Also, what you need to be cognizant of, you want chalk on every contact surface. So if you think about it, not only is this a contact surface, this back here is a contact surface. Because as you grab, it's like the opposite of a hook grip. So instead of your thumb going underneath, your thumb goes on top. So you don't want sweat or rain, depending on the weather, getting on your thumb, and then that just slips off. So you chalk the back. I chalk the back of my first 2 fingers. This is for any farmers or deadlift or anything like that. I just make sure that contact surface is chalked up as well. So I have my hands chalked, and then the back of my hand, so I don't run the risk. My thumb should never fall. And if it falls, it's because I didn't prepare. And by not preparing, I didn't chalk this surface right here. So I make sure that I chalk those to where the thumb doesn't fail. What's going to fail is going to be the pinky and the ring finger. Those are the weak link on the ulnar side. Also, what I do when I'm doing farmers, I use a spud belt, which has Velcro here. And when I'm walking, that hurts like a son of a bitch.
Rug burn.
When my forearm rubs up against the Velcro. So what I make sure that I have an elbow sleeve on, especially if I'm doing something for max distance with turns. I don't want to be thinking like, man, my forearm is really getting rubbed raw as I'm 150 feet in and I need 20 more feet, but I can't concentrate because like I'm starting to bleed out of my arm. So I do my spud belt, my Ray-Ban belt, my spud belt whenever I'm doing moving events, and I always make sure that I have an elbow sleeve on my left side to prevent that from getting all chewed up. So 2 little things to make sure that I don't have any unforeseen errors, unforced errors. I don't want to hurt myself when I'm doing an event, and those 2 things would definitely hurt if your thumb fails for whatever reason, and if you tear your arm up and you can't continue because of that.
Thanks, Dirty.
Of course. Shut up.
Andy always good for dropping knowledge bombs. Even things like I've never chalked out there because it is something, well, I barely make it there on these farmers handles anyway. I get like the tip of my finger. I got little meat wagons.
You're not used to holding girth in your hand, Nick.
Damn it. I just gave him the holy grail of open doors. Here we go. What else are we going to say? I mean, usually something follows I mean.
You've said enough. I mean.
He's mad because he has red hair.
I am not. That is false.
Alright guys, that is really about it for the little tips and tricks of the farmers. There's little fine-tuned things with everything we do, especially when it comes to the strongman movements. Yoke, farmers, log, circus dumbbell. There's general knowledge, like a 101 type thing, and then there is the fine-tuned stuff, which you don't really need to worry about until you've got most of the basics down. So for those of you out there, now the basics for farmers are pretty simple. You pick it up and you run with it. If you aren't familiar with some of the basics for the farmers, I did do a video with Tom and Juji on breathing and bracing with a yoke and farmers where I go over some of the basics for both of them. That will be a good one for you to watch. I will link that in one of the cards for you guys so you know exactly where to go. Speaking of Juji and Tom, we will be seeing them later in the week. They're coming up to get some training done with us, so there should be good footage from that. One of the next videos I get out to you guys most likely will be with them, so our schedule will be a little messed up, a little different, so I will get that video out to you guys as soon as possible. But until the next time, guys, you know what the deal is. Get out there, get after, and embrace the suck. I'm out. I'm ending on that one.
I got a new hat.